All right, cool. So I guess before we jump in, originally I guess I had done this talk 2 weeks ago, and I suggested that people could install the dependencies and toss up your own what do you call it, your own text editor, and you could kind of code along. It's probably a terrible idea. I'm going to be honest with you. Trying to code along at this while I'm presenting is not going to be the most productive way for you to absorb everything that's going on. But in case you wanted to kind of look at the dependencies that you need to install in order to get working with something like this, and then there's my repo that you can kind of go and analyze and see what's up there. Then you can kind of see how different chunks of code are working together, and then afterwards, tomorrow or weekend or whatever like that, you can kind of get playing with your own Dash apps. So a little bit about who I am. So my name is Blair Thurman. I work at Galvanize, and my title at Galvanize is Technical Admissions Officer, which is a real fancy way of saying that I do most of the interviews for the folks who are interested in our immersive programs. And a little bit about me before I went to Galvanize is that I had been getting a degree in physics in the winter before Galvanize, and what I found out about physics is that I really enjoyed modeling sets of data, and I really enjoyed making complicated problems look simple to people and communicating my analytics. But what I didn't like doing was having to deal with broken equipment from the 1970s that has not worked since the 1970s. So I decided, I wanted to just kind of become a data scientist and analyze and play with the data rather than worrying about what device is collecting it. So that's kind of a little bit about why I decided to go this route. And also a little bit more about my work is that, my main gig is doing admissions work for Galvanize, but on the side, I take a lot of contracts. Specifically, I just kind of have random networks across Colorado, Washington, and probably soon California and Arizona. Sometimes there's small businesses and they're just like, hey, where did my profit margin go? I have all this data. I need you to look at it for me and kind of make sense of it in a business light. So I whip up a quick Dash app after I clean up their data in Pandas. I make some quick visualizations, and then I summarize it for them and kind of tell a story with these Dash apps. And sometimes they're larger scale. A lot of the consulting that I do is for, it could be a small coffee shop, or it could be a grow operation for someone in the cannabis industry. So that's kind of what I like to do is business intelligence and sometimes predictive modeling and things like that. So cool. That's me. That's my story. The agenda for tonight is that I'm going to intro Dash. We're going to talk about what it is, why you should care about it, and kind of its place in the tech stack. We'll probably do that for about 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to live code an app for you. It's going to take about an hour. We're going to allot about an hour for it. So the app's going to go through 2 stages. We're going to get the first kind of bare bones skeleton working, and then we're going to make it pretty and polish it up after that. So there will be 2 versions of that. And if you're in the repo, you can actually see there is the simple app and there is the nice app, and you can kind of see how there's 2 different versions that will compare against one another. If there's some time at the very end, I'm going to kind of show you a personal project I was working on once upon a time that is now defunct, but it'll kind of show you how I first got introduced to Dash and some of the capabilities that it has, and then of course some questions at the end. Great. So yeah, what is Dash? So I guess the best way I want to introduce Dash is kind of introducing the technologies that it relies upon. So the first tech that Dash relies on is Flask. So raise your hand if you have used or have experience with Flask. Okay, cool. That's perfectly fine. So just in case y'all know, Flask, and then maybe we'll talk. I'm going to do lots of hand waving throughout this event, and so Flask is the back-end web framework for most Python apps, and it's what is going to handle a lot of the calls and the web stuff that I really don't care about as someone who only deals with Python and wants to work with analytics. So it is the server side stuff of what's going on for this Dash app. It's also very low level and sometimes cumbersome to work with, and so Dash kind of also wraps a lot of the Flask functionality in a way that makes it easier for us to work with. Now, the other thing it works with is Plotly. How many of you folks work with Plotly? Cool. So Plotly is really cool because this is where we start getting into interactive visualizations and plots and charts. So the thing that Plotly is really cool about is that it wraps around a JavaScript library called D3, and D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. And D3 is really cool because it's what allows you to, I guess the first time I ever saw what D3 was and was capable of is I was watching some news coverage for the 2016 election, and someone tapped on the TV a state, and the state came up, and then there were a bunch of analytics in there, and then they were kind of able to explore those analytics, and then they double tapped on the state, and it went back and was back to the map of the United States. And I was like, that's so cool. they've totally got to have someone behind the scenes like managing that and trying to sync the clicks. No, it's just that they have, programming that works to where you can touch a TV and it has these interactive things going on. So Plotly uses as a subsection of D3, which is normally also very cumbersome to work with in straight up JavaScript, and allows people like myself in Python who are too lazy or don't enough time to learn JavaScript to start getting these interactive visualizations. So that's really cool. The other thing that this technology is primarily relied upon is React JavaScript. And I'm not going to raise my hand because I don't code in React JavaScript or know any JavaScript for that matter. But who here does work with React? All right, good. So we're all friends here. No one here knows JavaScript. That's okay. So the thing you should know about JavaScript or React JavaScript is it's all the buzz right now. It creates, I guess if you had to know what is React and what's the idea behind it is that in Excel, if you have the idea is that you have functions that rely on other cells, and if you update a cell, it updates all those other cells that are dependent on it. It reacts to your inputs, and so that's kind of what React JavaScript is supposed to do. And so what Dash does is it kind of borrows elements from React, like drop-down menus, and it has components that it combines so that if I'm hovering over something and I have another chart that is dependent on another chart, that other chart will kind of reactively update itself based on where my cursor is on the main plot. So you can kind of get deeper inquiries into what's going on. So it combines interactive visualizations, it creates reactive components, and it uses the back end of Flask and Python to make Dash. And so that's why it's really cool. So before I start talking about how it compares to things like Boca, why you should care about Dash and its functionality is that traditionally, if I was in Python and I wanted to make a quick little app for someone, I would spin up a Flask app. I would probably have a PNG that has a plot in it. It's like, this is your analysis. And then below that PNG, there would be some markdown text. And maybe there's a hyperlink in there or something like that, which is really exciting. But ultimately, it was static and boring. And so, we want to make our apps lively and something that kind of tells more of a story and something kind of sucks in our users to kind of play with our plots a little bit more. And then kind of going a little bit more in the stack on what Dash kind of competes with is Boca. How many folks here know what Boca is? Okay, cool. So Boca is awesome, and it does a lot of the things that I'm actually going to be kind of comparing against. But the reason why Dash exists and why I push for folks to go learn Dash instead of Boca is it has increased functionality, especially in terms of combining components and making them kind of react together in an app way. And on top of that, it's easier to get into. The tutorials for Dash are just, it was definitely designed with a kind of like a user experience of trying to understand how to use Dash and all the ways it wraps around these various technologies. Where Boca is just less easy to get into, and just because it's less easy to get into doesn't even necessarily mean it is lower in the programming hierarchy. It's just kind of harder to kind of work with. So I have a quick, I think there's a link here. Let's see if the link will work this time. So if this generates, which I think it's trying to do, I don't know what, dang it. So maybe this isn't going to work this time. But this was a plot that I had last time that I showed up, and it was basically just, it's built on Boca. And this plot basically it showed the number of GitHub stars for the Boca main. Oh, look at this. It works. Splendid. Okay, cool. So what it shows is the number of GitHub stars for Boca since it was released in October of 2013. You kind of see this number of linear trends for it. And then in blue, we have Dash's number of stars. And so Dash is kind of exploding onto the space. And it was released publicly around late June, early July. So this is its actual, how many people have been able to have access to it since it released alpha, or left alpha, I should say. So it's definitely got a lot of momentum behind it, and I think that it's going to supplant Boca very soon. So just kind of letting you guys know a little bit that this is an upcoming and awesome tech. And then a little bit on the scope. I didn't have any time to make the slide, so it looks boring compared to the other slides. But a little bit about the scope of tonight is that we're just going to be working in a developer environment. So we're going to get these apps to work on my own browser, using my own computer as the server, if you will. I'm going to talk about nothing about deploying or using some kind of virtual private server to deploy your app. So if your intention is to know everything about the app so that you could go make your own web app and share that URL with your friend. I'm going to stop short of everything that has to do with getting it to the World Wide Web, and that's a whole other can of worms. I definitely implore you to ask me questions, and I definitely have some experience using Heroku to do that. But that'll be at the end if you want to ask me some questions about it. We're just going to get an app working on my own computer and kind of show it. And then some more things about the scope is that, so the very first version of, I forgot to say that we're going to be doing the iris visualization. I wonder if I even have the Jupyter Notebook. I don't have the Jupyter Notebook, but that's okay. So this is the first version of the app that we're going to make. It's called the Simple app, and then kind of looks like an eyesore. But what we're going to be doing is that there is a data set in sklearn. It's like the hello world data set when it comes to analytics. It's iris visualization. So there is basically there are 4 categories of this data set that have to do with irises, and this data set is meant to be used as a classification kind of data set for you to kind of practice new classification models on, or if you're doing a visualization talk on a web framework. And so it has 4 features on these flowers. So it has sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width. And the idea is that usually you leverage machine learning or something like that to figure out the 3 different types of irises that are in this data set. So I forget what those names are. Actually, I think I have the names in this next app. So this is the final version that I want to get to by the end of the hour. It's a lot prettier, a lot better formatted between the 2. And so we're going to hopefully kind of get to this less of an eyesore, something that you actually want to present to someone, not necessarily something that is forced upon you like this one. So we'll get into all that. I think that's all I have to talk about with that. I think we're just going to jump into the demo. Cool. All right. So I already have these are currently running those 2 other versions of it. Oh yeah, and one more thing about live coding and stuff like that. I'm definitely going to make mistakes, and you're definitely going to see them a little bit before me. So I'll probably get 90% of my own errors debugged just like that, and I won't. It'll be like a comma or something like that, or I didn't close a parentheses. But occasionally I will be like, hey, who saw the error and who can help me? So it'll be a team effort. It'll be fun. All right. Cool. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to our desktop, and at our desktop we're going to make a new directory. So I'm just going to call this -dir. Cool. So I got my new directory. Now we're going to cd into my new directory. In fact, is this really tiny for you guys? It's kind of tiny for me. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Move it over a little bit. Come on.
Command plus make the font bigger.
I wanted to make the whole window. I guess it does make the whole thing bigger, doesn't it? Forgot that. All right, cool. That looks better. Great. So we're going to go into my dash directory, and we're just going to make an app.py file. And then we're going to open up Atom. So Atom, by the way, is my preference for text editor. You can use whatever you like if you like into Sublime or something else, but I use Atom. So we're going to open up Atom, and doing the same kind of thing here. Open up my app. It's blank. Making it a little bit bigger font. Going to make the window bigger so we can all see and code together. Okay, cool. So let's talk dependencies. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import dash, and we're going to import dash HTML components as HTML. We're going to import dash core components as DCC. And I think that's all that we are going to import for right now. So just a quick word on all these things. Dash is kind of, it's just the app that we're going to use, and we're going to instantiate an empty app using the dash dependency. I don't know anything about HTML, but I know enough to get it working inside of a Dash framework. So, of course, the Dash HTML components handles everything that has to do with making divs. And I guess if you needed to know anything about HTML, this is what you need to know, is that HTML divides things on your web app into divs, and those divs are customizable in the fact that you can move them around, shrink them, make them bigger, and you can style them. So that's pretty much all you really need to know about how HTML works in order to get functional with the HTML components in Dash. And then the core components handle two things. One thing is that they're going to communicate to the back end your plots that you're making and then where to put them in your Dash app. And they also handle a lot of the JavaScript stuff as well. So they are what instantiates the drop-down menus and stuff like that. So excellent. So I guess the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to make our app. So app is equal to dash.dash. We're just going to leave it open like that. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start making a layout for our application that we have here. And also, I've got a second computer over here, so I'm totally cheating on this code. So I'm like half real live coding, but I'm also making sure that I'm not, making anything silly on the fly. So there is an attribute to your app object called layout, and you're going to set that to an HTML div. So HTML.div, and then it accepts. It's a function, so it's going to accept your first thing it's going to accept are its children. And so children are basically just a set of HTML components, so they live in a list. So then we'll kind of nest in here. And the first thing that we're going to put inside here as our children is just a header. So I'm just going to say HTML.h1, whoop, and then I'm going to say iris visualization. Cool. All right, and then here at the bottom, we're going to make an if name block because we like to follow good practices. And we are going to say app.run server, and then we're going to pass two arguments into this running server. So the first thing we're going to pass in here is debug equals true. I'll tell you what that does. And then we're also going to change the port, and I'll tell you why we're going to change the port. Port is equal to 8052. So the first thing we're going to talk about here real quick before we're going to look at this app now, and we're going to see what this looks like. So the first thing is that this debug equals true is that if you save your app file, what debug will do is it will check and it will say, hey, I noticed you saved your app again. I'm going to now load that up on your browser, so that way you can instantly kind of save it. Otherwise, you have to stop the server on the fly and then type in an extra command. So it helps you just program a little bit faster. The reason why I'm saying port is equal to 8052 is that the default port is 8050. 8050 is currently being used by my simple app, which I already showed you, and 8051 is being used by my nice app. So we're just going to set it equal to 8052. And if you're kind of curious, like in an abstract way, what port is, or what these ports are, is it your browser listens to these ports and it says what's in these ports, and then it pulls up whatever's in that port to itself. So I'm using my computer to say, hey, take this app, send it over to 8052, and then my browser, which we'll open it up in here in a second, is listening in to 8052. So we're going to save this now, and we're going to go back to our terminal window. And now to launch our app, at least locally, we're going to say Python app.py. Let's see if it works. Hey, look at that. So it says it's running, and it'll give us the URL that we can use it at. And then it says the debugger is active, so that means it's just letting us know that if I make a change, it will allow us to do that dynamically. So opening up a new window. Hey, look at that. So we have made our first Dash app together. How wonderful. Let's do something useful with it now. So the first thing that we got to do is I guess we're going to make some drop downs. So you guys notice how over here we have these drop downs of sepal width and sepal length and stuff like that. So we're going to make these things first. I guess it would also probably be helpful to have a data frame that has those columns in it and then the data, right? Because we want to visualize some data. So I guess let's make a function here that loads up a pandas data frame. So first of all, we're going to import pandas as PD. If you folks aren't familiar with pandas, it is the Excel analog in Python. It's what handles almost all of your I/O for your data, and it also does almost all your data manipulation and cleaning. So it's a very handy tool for fun stuff like this. And then we're also let's make a function here. Yeah, I'm not going to load anything else up right now. So def load data frame. We're not going to even give it any arguments. We're going to give it a little bit of documentation because we like to have good practices, and we're just going to say returns a df of the iris data set. Cool. All right. And so the first thing we're going to do is, we do need to import one more package. We need to, so this package, by the way, this data set lives in sklearn. Sklearn is primarily used for machine learning. It's what has all your machine learning models in it, but it also has some friendly data sets like the iris data set inside it. So we're going to go from sklearn import data sets. Excellent. And then the next part that we're going to do is we're going to say data is equal to data sets dot load iris. And then so this function has an attribute on it called .data, and so this will kind of give me an array of just some data. It also would probably be helpful since I'm handling NumPy arrays to import NumPy as NP. And Pandas is built on top of NumPy, and NumPy handles all of your arrays that you want to do, and lots of linear algebra matrix stuff. So now that we have the data, we're going to now want to get the column names as well. So we're going to say columns is equal to datasets dot load iris. Oops, not load df. Load iris dot columns. I think it's columns or is it cols? Oh, feature names. All right, so feature names. All right, and so then we're going to turn these into a pandas data frame. So df is equal to pd dot data frame. We're going to set data equal to data. We're going to say columns is equal to cols, and that's all we're going to put in there. So one other thing is that we have 4 columns right now in this data frame. It's going to be the sepal width, petal length, but we don't have the category of flower yet, and so that's a whole other separate thing that we got to load up real quick. So we're just going to say df target is equal to datasets dot, that's right, we're in the iris dot target. Excellent. Okay, cool. And we're going to return our data frame. So we're going to actually make this a global variable. I'm going to put it above my app. So I'm just going to say df equals load df. Cool. So now we have a pandas data frame. Now we can start working with our data. So I guess the next part that we're going to start getting into, like I said, is going to be the actual dropdown. So these dropdowns are going to live in their own HTML div. So we're going to give each of them their own HTML div. So HTML div, give it its own list, and then inside there we're going to go and call our dash core components library. So like I said, that handles a lot of those React JavaScript things, such as the drop-down menus, and it also tells it where to put things like our graphs. So from here, we're going to call a drop-down. So drop-down or drop-downs? It is drop-down. Great. Drop-down. And the first thing that we got to give as an argument to our drop-down is an ID. And so this ID that drop-down has is what we're going to use to combine those components. Because I told you guys earlier that React combines things and other things. It just needs to know what these components labels are so you can call them throughout your script. So the first thing we're going to say is ID equals, I don't know, drop-down 1. Actually, I'm going to do drop-down. Yeah, we'll just call it drop-down 1. Oh, and you know what else? It's supposed to be a string. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to give it some options. So options is structured in a way to where it takes a list of dictionaries. And in each of those dictionaries, there is going to be a label, so the label that the user sees, and a value. And the value is kind of what's underneath the hood being passed around. So I'm going to use a list comprehension to construct this. So inside my list comprehension, I'm going to make my dictionaries, and we're going to say label. We're going to say I, and we're going to say value. We're going to set that back to I, and we're going to say for I in df.columns. And then there is an extra little thing here on the end of the columns. I'm going to say up to the 4th column. And the reason why I'm saying up to the 4th column is because I don't want the target column to be selected later. So I'm just trying to say, don't give me the last column, which is target. OK, cool. So this drop-down should have options. It has a name. And the next thing we got to give it is a default argument. So that default argument is value. And so we're going to set value equal to, I guess we'll just set it to the first column, actually. So we'll say df dot column Dot columns, dot column. It's dot columns, right? Yeah, it's dot columns. Dot columns, and then we'll just say the 0th element from there. So that'll be our first. I think that's about it. I feel like I'm missing something, but who knows? All right, let's see if it works, huh? Let's see if we got a drop down on our app yet. So we're gonna save it. We're gonna go over here. We're gonna see if it says it detected a change. Debugger is active. Cool. So it's reloaded. It likes it. We're gonna go over to our app. Loading, loading, loading. Hey, look at that. So we have our first drop down. It's got those 4 columns that we want. Let's put another column on there. So I'm going to copy paste a little bit since we're going to be basically making pretty much the same type of app. And actually, I guess we're gonna make a whole other separate div. And I'm going to make sure I have the right formatting. And now you're kind of also starting to understand why I have this nested formatting the way I do, is so I can kind of keep track of what's nested inside of what. So I've got a header, I've got 2 divs, and each side of those divs I have dropdowns. So the first thing we got to change is we got to give it a new name, so dropdown 2. The options doesn't change. We want the exact same options, but what does change is this is the default that we want. So we're just going to give it the second column to select from. Now a little bit more about, actually, you know what, let's just run this and I'll show you how we're going to make it look a little bit better. So I messed something up. I probably forgot to close something, didn't I? Where does it tell me I'm at? Line 40. See, I don't need that. Right? No, I need to close that. I need to close the div that, okay, I just got to close this first. Okay, so what this is saying is that I didn't close this div up here, and so it was trying to put one div inside another div. So let's just make sure this one's closed.
Square brackets somewhere there too. Right before, is it? Okay.
Oh, you're right. No, he's right. I need to close my square brackets. We were going to have a init and a init error if I didn't do that. Remember last time I got an init error? That was a fun one. So I'm just going to check my parentheses and make sure everything's closed the way I want it to be. Excellent. You can kind of see how it's being highlighted underneath, so you can kind of figure out where everything is.
Harder to see the highlighting on the screen.
Oh. All right. Okay, so let's go back to our app.
It's good to have some errors, so because people are going to encounter errors.
Right? Yeah, you're going to have lots of errors. So, and 90% of the time it's going to be an open parentheses or a comma or something like that, and it's fun. Okay, cool. So we got 2 drop-downs, but I don't want them to be kind of vertically tossed below each other. I kind of would rather them be right next to each other, kind of like they were over here, right? So that is actually why we put them in different divs, so that we can kind of move them around. So after this children argument, which right now is a list, children is a list of HTML components that you are trying to put inside another div, or DCC components as well. So it takes another argument called style. So style is a dictionary. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say the width of this div is going to be equal to, I don't know, 50%, right? And yeah, that's all we're going to put in there for now. I'm going to purposely make it not 100% the way I want it to, so we can kind of see what happens when I don't do that. And the second drop down is that we're going to give it another argument called float, or not another argument, but another key value pair. So we're going to give it float, and we're going to float it. Oh wait, look at that. See? I do silly things like this sometimes. I use an equal sign. I should be using colon. I caught it that time. Anyway, so we got the float. We're going to float it to the right, but not in all caps. So let's see. Did I break it? Nope. Cool. Okay, cool. Almost there. Now they're you know, it understands. So basically, what it thinks is it has, you know, one div right here. And it has another div right here, and the only thing I told it is that I just want it to kind of one be on the left and one be on the right. So it's doing what I told it to do. But what I got to do is I got to tell it to kind of treat something as what they call an inline block. And I believe the inline block argument goes in the first div. So we're going to say display. And we're going to say inline block. So that's going to kind of treat it in this different fashion to where let's Let's see if, oh, look at that. Cool. All right. So now that it's an inline block, it's basically letting it know like you can put things over on top of me, and it's up to the user or the programmer, the developer, to make sure that you are not putting it directly over whatever component you have. So yeah, you just got to be careful with that, I suppose.
Can you click on each one of those just now so we can visualize what's
Sepal width, sepal length, or pedal width. Look at that.
they're the same, it's just the defaults are different in each dropdown.
Yep. So yeah, it's functioning kind of like this up here. But we still haven't made this giant plot yet. So we're going to make a giant plot now. Excellent. I think that's all for that section. Cool. So now we're going to get into another fun part of this development. So the first thing we're going to do is that we are going to, let's see, am I putting this in the right spot? Yes. So I'm going to put a comma after this div. And then we're going to make another, actually this is not going to be an HTML div right now. This is just going to be a dash core component. And we're going to call graph on it. And the only argument the graph is going to take is the ID of the plot that I'm trying to make. So we're just going to say ID is equal to main plot. And by convention, these IDs use a hyphen in them instead of an underscore. It bothers me, but that is the convention for this. So we're just going to stick to that. I'm tempted just to see if this, yeah, I want to make sure it doesn't break right now. Yeah, so nothing's happened. We just told it that there's a dash core component underneath. Cool. So now we're going to get into the next huge giant concept around making dash apps, and that is how do you make your app kind of read feedback reactively and kind of change to different inputs. So it needs to now take the values from my drop-down menus. It needs to select those desired columns for my pandas data frame, and then it needs to take the data, stick it in a plot, and then return that plot to this whole layout, this app layout. So the way that we do that is with callbacks, and I'm not going to get too much in about callbacks and their the underside programming, but it is essentially a wrapper for a function. And if you aren't familiar with wrappers, they're really cool. And that's all I'm going to say on that. I could talk about it for a while, but you don't need to know what a wrapper is for getting this going. But before we get into making our wrapper, we got to get some new dependencies going on in here. So we're going to go back to our import statements. And so let's see, what is it called again? Yeah, so from our import, or I guess is it from? Yeah, it is from. It is from. Okay, so from dash dot depend. I can never spell this. Dependencies. Is that how you spell it? Dependencies. Nope. I always put an A in there when I don't need an A. Import input and output. Cool. So we're gonna put input, output, and so the first thing it's going to actually return is the output. I think yeah, that's right. Put on a new line. So output, and output takes one. It takes actually two arguments. The first one's going to be the ID of whatever you're returning. So if you recall, that's going to be main plot. And the second thing that it takes is, what am I returning? What should I tell Dash that I am returning? And what we're going to say is you are returning a figure, and this is a Plotly figure. And just so you know, Plotly, every single Plotly figure, whether it's a bar chart, or if it's a line graph, or if it's a choropleth, or God forbid a pie chart, it's going to have two components inside of it, the data and the layout. So the layout tells it how to make the data look pretty, and the data is, well, it's the data. So we're gonna construct that inside of this callback. So that's what's being made reactively, is this data and this layout inside the figure. The next thing the next argument that callback is going to take is going to be a list of inputs, and this is important. A list of inputs, and if you try to, even if you just have one input, it still takes a list of them. And I learned that lesson the hard way one night when I could not understand why my code wasn't working when I just had one simple input and output, and it said no, make it a list of inputs. So it takes in the same kind of things in that it takes an ID of, okay, what am I listening for? And what it's listening for in the beginning is going to be dropdown 1. And then it says, okay, I have this dash core component dropdown. What am I going to pull from it? And that answer is going to be value. And so remember, we set our default value up here to the original column. And then options, whatever you have selected, it changes the value underneath. So every time I'm up here and I'm saying pedal length, that is changing the value of your first dropdown component. And then we have 2 of these that we want to use, so we're going to give it another one. I'm just going to say drop down 2. Now in my source code, I believe I have these nested, or at least it's not nested. I think I have them indented. I guess it just looks better that way. I don't think that's necessary. I'm going to do that because it looks nicer. And so like I said, wrappers wrap around functions. So let's make a function, and we're going to call this Plotly Maker. And the arguments that it accepts are going to be these arguments in the order of which they appear. And now we can rename them if we feel like it. So what I'm going to rename them as is going to be col1 and col2. And we're also going to be good, and we're going to have best practices, and we're going to put some documentation. So we're going to say returns Plotly figure for desired columns. It's not the most verbose, but if we were to come back to this in a couple weeks or something like that, you would just see a bunch of app layouts and callbacks, and you'd be like, what does this one callback do? Oh, this makes the Plotly figure for our main plot. Okay. So like I said, we got data and we got layout. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to instantiate an empty list called data. And data is going to take, it's going to make a thing called a trace. And a trace holds the data that you want to display on your Plotly graph. And a trace, by the way, is a Plotly object. So that means, guess what? We got to go import another thing. So from up here, I forgot already the syntax for it. Yeah, import Plotly dot graph objs, right? Objs, yep, as go. And so we are going to, I guess the whole idea of how we're going to make this list of traces is that for the target in, we're going to say in range 3, a little bit of, remind me to talk about why I made a range later. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But we're basically going to iterate through something 3 times. We are going to then say trace is equal to go.scatter. So it means it's making a scatter graph object. And inside of our scatter graph objects, we're going to say x is equal to df col1, right? Oh, that's right. We got to pass a mask. So I guess I can't talk about. I need to talk about why I'm doing the range 3. So in this simple app that we're trying to make right now, I suppose in the pandas data frame that we made to begin with, and I had that column called target. The way it doesn't say, oh, this is a Setosa, this is a versicolor, this is a Virginica. What it says is this is a 0, this is a 1, this is a 2. So I'm just trying to make an iterable for the 0, 1, and 2. And that is that. So I'm going to say I need to pass a mask into my pandas data frame so that I only select the data that is 0, 1, or 2, whatever target I happen to be into. So we're going to say data frame, and then we're going to pass a Boolean data frame inside of it. If you're not familiar with masks, you're basically just passing a Boolean array of trues and falses into your main data frame, and then it kind of pulls out the regular data that you're interested in. So we're going to say where the target is equal to target, our own selected target, and then we're going to pull out the column that we are interested in. And then we're going to say the y is going to be the second column there. I believe that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're gonna purposely make it not pretty right now, and we're gonna show you what it looks like when we, yeah, that'll be good enough for right now. We'll show you some new things here, and then we got to make this thing called a actually. Data.append trace. Cool. So now we got, hopefully we got a list of traces that we can call and give back to our main plot there. And then without getting too much into layout, we just got to instantiate it for now. We're going to style it up later. But we're just going to say layout equals go.layout. We'll just make it empty. And then we're going to say return a dictionary of, that's right, data. And then guess what? It takes data as its value and layout with also a value of layout. Cool. So hypothetically speaking, this is going to work if I save. Let's see if it works. Detected user. Hey, it says it works. Let's see if it works like intended. Excellent. That is the way I intended it to work right now. So by default, if you just make a a graph object from Plotly using scatter, it's by default makes a line plot of some sort, a line trend. So we just got to specify in the data that we want to use markers. So we're going to go into our Plotly over here, to our Plotly maker. We're going to make a comma. We're going to say mode equals, I think markers, is it marker, markers, marker? It's markers, plural, great. And then we're going to, hey, look at that. I think, is that everything for the simple app? I think that's everything for the simple app. Okay, cool, splendid. So yeah, that's the simple app. Now we're going to do a lot of sprucing up. I did actually want to pause here for just a minute and give anyone time to ask some quick questions before, 5 minutes of questions of maybe something specific in the code that I wasn't explicit about. So yeah, if anyone has any questions right now, would be an excellent time before we start going into the prettyifying section of this talk. Who's got questions? Yes.
So it can only run on the web browser, right? Not on iOS or Android.
Well, it won't make, these aren't going to be like apps that you can download from the store or anything like that. But if you deploy these to the web, which is outside of the scope of this talk, and you program with intention using mostly percentages rather than saying, I guess, so you know how when I was making my dropdowns, I said 50%? You could also set it to say 400, and that would make it a set value of 400 pixels, which is going to be more difficult for your phone to use in certain respects. So especially since you're holding your phone vertically rather than sideways and all that jazz. So as long as you're coding it out in the right way, you can view these apps on a mobile device, but you do have to be careful with the way you program them out. Does that make sense? Any other questions?
What did you call the function wrapper again?
Oh, it is a callback.
What is that the same thing as a decorator?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, wrapper, decorator, synonymous, yeah. And there's a lot underneath the hood that is kind of going on right now too. It basically, this callback is doing the monitoring of my inputs, and then when it notices an input change, it calls this function Plotly maker, and then it sticks those inputs into it and returns the output to wherever we want it to go. All right, here we go. Cool. So let's make the nice app. So let's see. If we want to make this, and we are here, I guess some things that we are noticing differently are that the markers look a lot prettier. So we're going to make the markers look pretty. We're going to change kind of the width that everything is inside of, and we're going to make it to where we have useful labels instead of trace 0, trace 1, trace 2. And then probably maybe some axis titles, and then there's also this other difference that you may not notice, is that there is this, what I think is kind of a really annoying toolbar. So I'm going to get rid of that toolbar as well. So we will kind of go through that. So the first thing that we're going to do is, I guess, let's make this pretty for the markers. No, let's not do that. We're actually going to make it to where this is thinner. So the way that we do that is kind of the same way that we changed the width with our original divs, except we're going to change the main div that everything lives inside of. So recall that this list right here that I'm highlighting is the same list that is right over here, and it's holding all of our children. And the second argument for those children is that we are going to give it a style, and we're going to just say width is 50%, or no, well, almost 60%. Let's do 60. I like 60%. And then that won't get us all the way there, but I'll show you what happens when you do that. So it made it thinner, but it put it on the wrong spot. So you want to center it, right? So the way that we are going to center it is by passing 2 more arguments, or giving it 2 more key value pairs, I should say. So we're going to give it margin left. See, I told you, everything uses these hyphens. It annoys me, but you got to do it. Margin left auto. We're just going to let it do auto. And that's another thing, kind of thinking in terms of mobile development. You want to make sure you set things to audible and scale instead of hard coding like, 200 points from the left or something like that. It also, that's another good practice because if it looks good on your screen, it might not look better on someone else's screen, and then we're also going to give it margin right, and we're going to pass it the exact same value. So we're going to say auto. Neat. All right, so it should be centered now. Huzzah! Success! So everything's looking a lot prettier. The next thing that we're going to do is we will make our markers pretty. So we are going to give a new argument to our scatter function that we got going on here. And we're going to say marker. And marker accepts a dictionary of arguments to style it however we want. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust the size. I think that's what we're going to do first. Yeah, we're just going to say, I think the size is the argument, right? Yeah, size. Excellent. So we're just going to say size, and we're going to set it to 15. Let's see how we like that. Cool. Kind of an eyesore, but I'll show you how we're going to make that look better. The next thing we're going to give it, and I'm going to actually start nesting this because we're going to pass a couple arguments in here. So, all right. So the next thing we're going to give it is an opacity, so that it kind of floats a little bit. So opacity accepts a value from 0 to 1. We're going to give it 0.7. And then we're going to do another thing. We're going to give it another argument called line. And so line inside of marker dictates the color and the shape of the line surrounding the marker. And we're just going to set that. It accepts its own dictionary. Everything is a dictionary in Dash and in Plotly. So we're going to say color is white. Maybe I should have said the black. I don't know. Maybe we'll do black instead. Maybe it would make more sense. I think it would make more sense. Don't you think so? I think we'll do black. We'll do black. Let's see what we like more, huh? Oh, I said back, didn't I? Nope, I said black. Okay. Can't really tell the difference, can you? Well, it was a good try. So that's how you change both the line that surrounds the outside and both the opacity. So you can kind of start seeing density of your markers, so that's kind of nice. And then I guess the last thing that we're going to change of our markers is their own individual color. And so this also kind of goes back to why I used range 3, is because I want to iterate through a colors list. So we are going to just say colors equal to some empty list. And we're just going to say red, green, and blue. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call that list down here, and we're just going to pass in the target that is being generated in our normal for loop. So save that. Hey, look at that. That's a lot prettier now. Cool. So I think I need to give it names, don't I? How did I get the names? Oh, that's right, because it's a trace. That's not an argument of. Yeah, okay, we'll get to that later. So we have prettier markers now. We have adjusted the width of everything. And I'm trying to think of all the other things that I really wanted to change about this. We will actually do the names since we're here. So we're going to do names in the exact same way that we kind of did the colors, but instead of hard coding in Certosa, Virginica, Versicolor, we're just going to say, I think it's from datasets, isn't it? I think it's in the, yeah. So we're going to say names is equal to datasets, which recall that's the sklearn attribute that holds all the data and the feature names and stuff like that. So datasets.load iris. And then the attribute that we call from the load iris method is going to be target names. And so we're going to, I think it would just be better, prettier, if we put it over here. Name is equal to names, and then we'll give it the target argument, put a comma at the end. Cool. So now we can see, it also, look at the hover here, is that it also kind of updates Certosa, Virginica, and Versicolor as we're kind of hovering, which is really cool. So that was pretty much all just Plotly stuff that we were doing. You didn't need to know anything about Dash or Flask or anything like that. You just needed to know some Plotly stuff. And if you want to know more ways to style your Plotly figures, if you just go and you Google Plotly marker styles, like they have some fantastic tutorial. That's one of the things I love about Plotly and Dash. They're the same company, or they come from the same company at least. Actually, I don't know what the parent company would be called. Maybe it's called Plotly. Anyway. They have fantastic tutorials and fantastic in-house made examples, which not every package maker really does, but they're trying to kind of scale up right now to an enterprise solution. I don't use this in enterprise solutions in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, they do a really fantastic job with helping you kind of see examples of how to make your own things customizable to you. So let's get now into this layout thing that we haven't talked about. So I guess one of the first things that we want to put inside the layout is that it's going to be responsible for kind of making the scale of this plot kind of fill out its div a little bit more. It's also going to handle things like the axis labels and the title. We're not going to give it a title because I think this header works well enough as a title. But yeah, anything that's not related to these specific markers or the data itself is what the layout handles. So I guess the first thing that we're going to give it is an x-axis argument. So we're going to say that is equal to, I think, col1, because col1 is a name. It's a string, so we can give it a string. And then we're going to say y-axis is equal to col2. And we're just going to give it that for now. Womp womp. I broke it. What did I do? I bet I just got the syntax wrong. I bet that's what it is. Oh, okay. You know what it is? I didn't make it a dictionary. Remember, everything's a dictionary. So I was just trying to give it a string, and I was just trying to say, okay, make it the string. But really what you have to do is you have to give it a dictionary with the key value pairs that you want to specify. And so specifically what we want to do in here is we want to say title is col1. And then we also want to make this a title col2. And the reason why, I mean, it looks kind of cumbersome from this perspective when you're just trying to pass one argument, but what this also allows you to do is you can say change the font to, I don't know, sans serif. You can make the font size change differently in here. You can also change the color of the text inside this dictionary. So that's why everything has to be a dictionary. Why did I do that?
In particular, it doesn't depend on order.
No, it does not. Nope. However you want to put it in there. Cool. So we have our sepal length and our sepal width. And then if I change this, petal width, petal length. Cool. So I can see the different axes titles, and we see our nice little markers that look a lot better. They have titles. There is this kind of awkward white space right up here and over here as well. So we're going to kind of get rid of that a little bit. And so the way that we're going to do that is by putting another argument into our layout function here. And so we're going to say margin is, guess what? It's a dictionary. Who could have guessed? And then we're going to give it percentages. So I'm going to give it a 5% buffer on the left. That 5% is just so that I don't cut off my own title. We're going to give it a bottom, so for B. We're going to give that also another 5% buffer as well. And then we're going to put no buffer on the top. So we're just going to hard code a 0 in there. And we're going to give it no buffer on the right as well. Let's see how that looks. Much better, much more full. See? I guess the reason why these look a little bit different, and you'll notice, is that I'm using a 60% instead of this app runs on a 70%. This is, remember, is the nice app that we're using to guide this whole thing. And also in my original code, I didn't have the header included in the main div. It was its own div, but it kind of looks ugly out there. I think it looks better inside, don't you? I also used an H2 instead of an H1 header, which if you recall, up here I used H1. So in my
Better and better every time you do it.
I know, iteratively improving myself. Cool. I wonder if that's virtually everything I wanted to get to right now. I feel like there's more. Don't you guys feel like there's more? Oh yeah, I forgot. I wanted to make, we want to get rid of one more thing, and that is this annoying little toolbar. So what we do is that this toolbar is a feature of the graph-core component that resides in our HTML app. And so right here, so right now we have an ID in there. And we're also going to say a config. I think it's config. Is it config? I already forgot already. Yeah, so we're going to say config equals, guess what? It's a dictionary of display, right? Display. Yeah, display mode bar. That's right. So display mode bar. And we're just going to say that's false. Cool beans. Now you'll notice that's not there anymore. And then I think there was actually one more thing in the layout. Oh, yeah. So I guess I should have shown you this before I got rid of the toolbar. So one of the things that you can do in the toolbar is you can select whether or not there is this invisible vertical line, or if it just selects whatever's closest to your cursor. Right now, it doesn't really look like it's that helpful to have a vertical line because we're not trying to look at vertical trends between each other. So what you can do is if you have the toolbar, you can just go up in the top right, you can select hover on closest. But if you're making an app that you don't want to have that annoying little toolbar, then you can just set that by default. So that is in the layout thing we got going on down here. And the way that we change that is we just say hover mode equals closest. I think that's it. Yeah, that should work. I think this is going to be the last edit we make for the night. Excellent. Oh, look at how that. Now, see, I think that's a lot more functional to use, don't you? So I guess that's it. I guess that's the whole kit and caboodle. The purpose of this whole thing is that I wanted to get you folks introduced to something that is still a very new technology in Python. It's only been out since last July, but it incorporates a lot of things about JavaScript that honestly make me jealous of JavaScript. And I wanted to make, like, the other day at my job, so I work in the admissions department. I'm like one of the only technical individuals on that department, and they posted a spreadsheet on some numbers between campuses and like that. And I was like, yeah, I guess that data is nice to look at, but there's just numbers. And so what I did is I made a quick Dash app over the weekend, and it took me like 2 or 3 hours or something like that, and had some trend lines in there, and it just visualizes for them their own data. It took me 2 or 3 hours to make to pull down this spreadsheet and to put it into some Plotly graphs, and then to put those Plotly graphs in a reactive Dash app, and then they can pass this URL around the office. The only thing I had to be wary of is security, because I didn't want this. It's a Heroku app, and so if you had the URL, you could easily scrape this data from our company. So I was like, oh, that's worrisome. And I found out over the weekend that there is OAuth protection already built into Dash. Should I demonstrate that? Do you guys want to see that? Okay, let's do it. Okay, I know I'm all excited now. So. This requires another package, so we're going to import dash auth, I think. So you got to install another dependency if you want to use this. And I feel, yeah, if not, I think I have some source code that I can reference and whatnot. So what you want to do is you want to say, no, I'm definitely going to have to reference the source code because I just barely got this working. So let's hope I don't show anything that I'm not supposed to. I definitely won't. Right. No tokens. Okay, cool. So there's nothing sensitive in this. This just shows you that there are dates and that there were names and the colors and that there's things. So this is pretty much everything you need to use in order to get, I guess this is just an in development version of it, because you don't, it's a really terrible practice to leave your password and your username in the code itself. You should use environment variables with your bash profile or whatever kind of environmental profile you're using. So we're just going to say hello world is the password. So we're going to say valid username password pairs is a list of a list. I'm not sure why it's a nested list, but it is. I guess ask the developers why they made that choice. And then the next thing is that we use our dash auth library. We call this method on it called basic auth, and it accepts the app that you've already instantiated, and it takes a list of lists. And in that nested list is the username and the password. And so if I save this, hypothetically speaking, it should have a password next time I try to load it up, or it'll be broken. It'll be broken. Invalid syntax. Oh, because you know what? Yep, yep-a-roni. There we go. Hey, okay, we got it working. Awesome. So that is what you're supposed to see. And the one thing you got to know about the authentication process is that, and there's a way to fix this in Flask directly, and I don't know how to do that because I don't think it's that important. But once someone logs in, it doesn't log them out at all. So you can go back to this and it will always keep you logged in unless you close down your browser completely. So I guess if I was in incognito mode, and I load it up, and it would think I'm a new user, and it would get a new session. But so for right now, if I say hello, and then I say the password is world, boom, now it's secure, more or less, kind of, sort of. Yeah, so there is security built in. It's fun. It's interactive. It's honest. I hope you guys think that this is a million times easier to use. Those of you who have experience with Boca, you should be of the opinion, hopefully after this talk, that Dash is pretty easy to get going with. I think usually the most amount of time that I spend is hunting down open parentheses, figuring out where my commas are, and then just Googling Plotly styling things because I don't know the huge plethora of Plotly styling things that they got going on. What I wanted to do is also give you folks kind of some resources as well here at the end. So these resources that I wanted to give you at the very end here is this is kind of just like an intro. What is Dash? This gallery link is really cool if you kind of want to show off to people what Plotly can do, or sorry, what Dash can do. Pretty comprehensive, really cool apps that I honestly can only wish to make. But they're really cool anyways, and it helps you kind of sell, like when I'm trying to sell someone on using me for a contract, I'm like, look at this gallery, I can make you something like this. And I make them something with like a white background, but whatever. And then this is the thing that you should really look at. If you're seriously interested in trying to get using with Dash, Google Dash getting started. And it's the first tutorial out of like 5. If you go through the first like 3 tutorials, you're going to be pretty much very apt to get a Dash app going in a development environment. The big elephant in the room, this is only a developer environment, so whatever you want to use to mount it, that's a whole other kit and caboodle can of worms. I use Heroku because it abstracts a lot of the web blah 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 from me, and I don't need to worry about threading and what the server's calling to this other thing. I just give it my app. I give it the CSV directly that I want, and then I will, from my own command line, say, create this for me, and then I can scale up and scale down the number of resources that I want my app to use from Heroku. Heroku's pretty easy to use, but there's other options out. There's a lot of options out there. And then I guess the last things I have to say for outro is that if you want to contact me for any kind of personal or professional reason, there's my personal professional email, blairdev1023@gmail.com. My birthday is October 23rd. Maybe you could guess that. And then if you have any Galvanize related questions related to the admissions department or our data science immersive or something of that nature, if you have a friend who's interested, please give them my email. It's blair.thurman@galvanize.com. And then the last part is the repo for this whole talk. So if you want to go back and reference this code and figure out what's going on, you can do that. But that's the whole thing. I guess there's time for questions now. Yeah.
That is a separate portion of it. Maybe just from your research. But is it possible to embed this into existing websites? I'm guessing because from what we saw, kind of building it from right?
Yeah. Or if you have your own access to your own virtual private server of some sort like that. So if you have more, so Heroku takes this away from you, but if you actually have access to what's going down in the server, you should be able to kind of manage a lot of different dependencies and different apps. You can also, for the record, use Dash to make multi-page apps, and you can also, in the same way that you would make a multi-page Flask app, and I forgot what I was going to say on that. And also, if you're familiar with Markdown, you can use a Markdown to do normal things inside of Dash. So I didn't do any text in here because no one wants to see Markdown text. But yeah.
It kind of depends on exactly what you mean. So iframe, you can embed one web page within another web page. And so let's say you had some other app, some other web page. You could just point to the URL to your Dash app within that. And technically, the web browser knows both of them separately. Kind of feel like.
I mean, I'm not a web developer either, so. But I just figured you probably have a lot of people who have existing websites or stuff. They don't want to rebuild the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
And so they might just want that specific component.
Yeah, they probably have real website skills where I do not. I'm a data scientist by trade. I know a lot about analytics and machine learning and statistics, and I just want to have what I do shareable to other people and to my clients. So it's definitely not designed. I mean, they are trying to market it a little bit more as enterprise, but if you are trying to get something that's kind of like, especially if you're trying to like migrate new technology, it doesn't compete well with things that are already in the whole like JavaScript environment. So maybe, yeah, that was my little blurb on that. Any other questions? Oh, I forgot to mention, I wore my flower shirt today since we were doing an iris visualization. Yeah, so I did I even dressed for you guys. Yeah.
So it's not really ready to be to use Dash to build a website, but probably a one-page app is okay.
Yes. Yes, for most purposes. You can, like I said, also make multi-page apps that link to one another and direct you through. There's not a lot of changes that I would need to make to my code right now to make it ready for deployment. I would have to, so if you guys remember, I have an app object in my script. All I would need to do is call, I would say app.server, and then I would say that equals server. And then I would need to use a lot of Heroku magic to make it work. So that's why I don't dive into any of that, is because then I got to go in the command line, and then I got to, you know, make a new Git repository, and then I got to create my app, and then I got to get running on there. But Heroku and Dash both have excellent tutorials on how to get that started if you want to deploy your app actually.
How much of the D3 universe does Plotly cover? I mean, you mentioned that it just kind of covers a subset of it.
Anything that you can think of that's analytical. Basically, it doesn't make actual like D3 objects, and then allows you to kind of customize those objects and work with actions in any kind of way that you want to. But what it can do is any kind of chart you can think of, like a choropleth or something like that. Oh, I should show my choropleth thing that I got going on. But anything that is a plot. And is in Plotly. So if you actually go to Plotly and you look at all their documentations, they have just like huge sums, like 30 plus different. Yeah, they have so many different things. I guess I could show you a little bit. I don't really know why I'm trying to describe plots with my hands. Plotly gallery. Oh yeah, by the way, just so you know, if you are in the R environment, the way I like to market this to R people is that Dash is like shiny for Python. Thank you. Wait, isn't that the Dash? That's the Dash one. Why is my internet connection so unbelievably slow? So that's actually the Dash gallery that I don't want to get into Dash gallery. But I did actually want to show y'all a project that, like I said, it was defunct. We're going to kill this one. We're going to go back. I'm going to go to this desktop. See, and then we're going to go to opioid epidemic. So I was trying to do a visualization project once upon a time on the opioid epidemic. I was pulling data from the CDC on mortalities by county, by year, and I wanted to kind of show how, you know, the history of how it grew out of control. Long story short, did not get all the data I wanted to, did not get enough demographic data to do the modeling for the data that was missing, and I was like, well, I learned a lot about Dash in the meantime, so that was cool. No, we want to go to source. Dash app, and yeah, so we are going to run this was originally going to be a multi-page app, and it runs from an index. It should run. Oh wait, I think that port is taken. I think I got to kill. Yep, of course, the port's taken. We're just going to kill these other two apps that we had going on. I'm just going to get rid of you. I'm going to get rid of you. Let's try that again. So it should launch on the 8050 port. This should become my opioid epidemic thing that I got going on. No, why? What's going on? Hey, I don't know what that was, but it worked. Cool. So the first thing is I just made a simple trend line of, you know, what type of what the death rate through a couple different drugs has been like over the past couple years, aggregated. So this by default only shows heroin, methadone, synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, which is fentanyl. Maybe you've heard of fentanyl. It's kind of the reason why everyone's dying right now. And then other opioids, like hydrocodone and that's Vicodin and other things like that. But you could also put in things like maybe you aren't even interested in any of those. You wanted to look at just alcohol and I don't know cocaine and amphetamines and see how that cocktail works. And so you can kind of see, oh, well, in 2006, a bunch of people were dying of cocaine overdoses. Not sure what was going on there, but it was apparently a thing that was going on once upon a time. And then, kind of see the trend going on. But that wasn't the cool thing that I made. This honestly did not take very much time. Oopsie. Oh, darn it. The cool thing that I ended up making was this. It was supposed to. This currently just shows unemployment as a choropleth. But if we go to, it's an interactive choropleth. Let's go to Michigan. I always like looking at Michigan over the years of the. I guess I could just type it out. I can't read. I like to look at Michigan kind of at the years before and during and after the recession. And so if we kind of go back to 2006, we see happy Michigan, and then we can kind of go county by county, and we can kind of see in the bottom right plot, you can see the median value per square foot. You can also see the unemployment rate in that county during that year, and then if the death rate was recorded during that year in that county, you could also see that. So sometimes lots of missing data, like I said. And then we can go to 2010, and then it's not so happy Michigan. And then you can kind of see in the top right how that specific trend of unemployment has been changing over the past 5 years. And so and some of these counties are crazy. Like, I did not know that there were counties within Michigan and across the United States that were straight up experiencing 25% unemployment during the recession right afterwards. Like, that's bad, all right? And so I thought that was a cool thing that I was making. But yeah, like I said, it was missing most of the things I wanted, which was the death rate of opioids. And so because of that, I abandoned my project. But I learned a lot about Dash while going through this project. So yeah. So yeah, that was a thing that I made.